Evangelism. Simply put, evangelism is sharing God's love and the person and message of Jesus with others. Simply put, evangelism is sharing God's love and the person and message of Jesus with others. I was in a conversation just several days ago with a minister friend of mine about the sermons we are going to preach in the coming weeks. And I mentioned to him that I was preaching on evangelism this Sunday. And he said, "Well, you didn't tell your congregation, did you?" I said, "Well, yes, I did. We send out an e-notice weekly, and we tell the congregation the topic, the theme, and the text for the day." And he said, "Well, that was a mistake." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "You're going to preach on evangelism, right?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "And you told them, right?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Nobody will be there." I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here to hear about evangelism, or I'm glad you're here given this weather. The truth is that we United Methodist Christians are unnerved, uncomfortable, and uneasy with evangelism. We United Methodist Christians, for the most part, really are unnerved, unsettled, uneasy with evangelism. And I think there are two reasons for that. One is selective memory. And this insight comes from our good friend Gary Rutherford. He shared this at a men's prayer meeting a couple of weeks ago. He said that we have selective memory when it comes to making disciples for Jesus Christ. Now, you know what selective memory is, don't you? Selective memory is remembering some things and then forgetting other things, especially if they are uncomfortable and inconvenient. And so Gary said we Christians have selective memory when it comes to sharing Jesus and making disciples for Him. We readily remember that Jesus told us to love God. We readily remember that Jesus told us to love others. We readily remember that Jesus told us we shouldn't judge other people. We readily remember that Jesus told us we should help the poor. But when it comes to personally sharing Jesus with others, we've got some selective memory, don't we? But I think the more compelling reason that we United Methodist Christians are unsettled with evangelism is because we've seen so much bad evangelism, so much unhealthy evangelism. I've shared before the scene in the Peanuts cartoon strip when Lucy comes and tells Charlie Brown that she convinced the boy who sits beside her in class that her religion was better than his religion. So she comes to Charlie Brown and she said, "Charlie Brown, today I convinced the boy who sits beside me in school that my religion is better than his religion." And Charlie Brown said, "Well, you did? How did you do that? Did you just convince him by the depth of your biblical knowledge?" "No." "Well, did you convince him because you had such astute theological insights?" "Well, no." "Well, did you convince him because you were so convicted and there was so much charisma flowing from you as you shared with him about your religion?" And she said, "No." And he said, "Well, then how in the world did you convince the boy who sits next to you in class that your religion is better than his religion?" And Lucy said, "I hit him with my lunchbox." Well, there's no place for lunchbox evangelism. Among followers of Jesus, there is no place for lunchbox evangelism. Let me tell you what lunchbox evangelism is. Lunchbox evangelism is me telling someone else that my view of God is the view of God they must have. It's me or you telling somebody else that the way we see Jesus and the way we relate to Jesus is the way they must see Jesus and the way they must relate to Jesus. It's you and me telling someone else that our experience with God, our experience with Christ, is the experience with God and the experience with Christ they must have. It's you or I assuming arrogantly, with intolerance, insensitivity, that somebody else must have, must experience, must know, must believe what you and I believe and experience. There really is no place in our witness for Jesus for insensitivity and intolerance or arrogance. But now let me be clear. Having said that, we need to understand that bad evangelism is no excuse for no evangelism at all. Let that sink in. Bad evangelism is no excuse for no evangelism at all. I mean, when we look at our text this morning, Jesus is really clear. He says in Matthew 28, the Great Commission, as Lisa mentioned, Go and make disciples. And if you think about it, that go is a mandate. It's an obligatory command to us. Go. He doesn't say, you might want to go. He doesn't say, I hope you'll go. He doesn't say, if it moves you, would you go? Jesus says, go and make disciples. That's a command. And then in Acts 1, he says, you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in Judea, and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. You will be my witnesses. So listen to me carefully. I know evangelism can be unsettling to you. I know it can be uneasy for you. But what I want you to hear this morning is we are called individually and collectively and as a community of faith to the ministry of evangelism. So having offered those foundational insights, let me share with you 4 things that I want you to know specifically about evangelism. First of all, the world needs Jesus. The world needs Jesus. I hope you believe that. I hope you believe in the depths of your soul and the depths of your heart that the world needs Jesus. Now listen to me. You can believe that Jesus is the Son of God. You can believe that He's Lord of your life. You can believe that He offers for all humanity the truths that humanity needs to hear, as I believe, and yet you can do that without denigrating other people. One can be convicted in our belief that Jesus is what the world needs without putting down other religious traditions and other religious practices and experiences. But we do need to believe that the world needs Jesus. Let me tell you why the world needs Jesus. First of all, He offers the assurance that God loves us and forgives us. It's in Jesus that humanity knows that God loves us and forgives us. And then in Jesus, we learn what abundant life is all about. Everyone wants to experience joyful living. All of us want to know abundant living. All of us want to be fulfilled in the depths of our lives. And nowhere can you find a roadmap for abundant living better than Jesus of Nazareth. And thirdly, Jesus teaches us how to live with other people. He offers us a pathway for how to live with other people, especially difficult people. There is no better guide. There is no better pathway. There is no better roadmap for dealing with other people, living with other people, getting along with other people than you find in Jesus of Nazareth. And then He points us to God as Father, Abba, the one who's with us in the ups and downs of our lives. It's in Jesus that humanity learns that God is our personal God, our Abba, our Father, who's with us in all the experiences of our lives. And on this list could go. But my first point here with you is we need to be convinced, convicted, committed that the world needs Jesus of Nazareth. Humanity needs Jesus. The second specific truth is this: you have a story to tell. You have a story that somebody needs to hear. In your bulletin this morning is a gift from a member of this congregation. It's the poetic piece, Footprints. I think you found it already. Again, that's a gift from a member of this church. And you know that poetic piece, and you know it ends with these words: during your times of trial and suffering, when you see only one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you. When you see only one set of footprints, it was I that carried you. You do know the footprints of God in your life, don't you? You can see the footprints of God in your life, can't you? You do have experiences with God that make a difference for you, don't you? You have known moments when life has been tough and God was there to lift your spirits. You've known moments when you needed wisdom for the right decisions and God's Spirit guided you to that wisdom that you need for those right decisions. You've had moments when you're not sure what path you should take, which way you should go, what you should do. And you can look back and you can see God's footprint guiding you along the right pathway in the right direction toward the right goal. Every one of you has a story of what God has done and is doing in your life. Now listen to me. Somebody needs your story. You are going to interface this coming week, these coming days, with people who need your story. In the workplace, in the neighborhood, perhaps in the family. There are people who need to know that God is at work in your life. There are people who need to hear your story. And you don't have to impose that story on them, but you should be willing to share that story. There are countless seeking people in our world who want to know that God really does make a difference in people's lives, and your story is evidence that that's the case. So know you've got a story and be willing to share that story. Third specific truth is this: it's easier than you think. Evangelism is easier than you think. For example, it's as simple as inviting someone to church. Do you realize when you invite somebody to church, that's the ministry of evangelism? There was a poll conducted not long ago among 22 congregations of varied denominations, and they asked the question in these growing churches, among those who had begun to attend those churches, what brought you to this church? So they polled the persons who had begun to attend these growing congregations with the question, what brought you to this church? Why did you come to this church? Listen to the answers. 2% of those who attended that church for the first time did so because of an advertisement. 6% of the people who attended that church for the first time attended because the pastor invited them. 6% attended because there was some expressive evangelistic effort from that congregation, some outward evangelistic effort put on by the congregation. So 2% came because they saw an advertisement. 6% came because the pastor invited them. 6% came because there was an intentional evangelistic effort out in the community. Listen to this. 86% of the people who came to a church for the first time came because someone personally invited them, a friend or a family member. I assure you, there are people who are waiting for an invitation. I assure you, you again will interface with people who simply need an invitation to church, if not this one, to some church. Because the number one way that people will intentionally seek out a congregation is by personal invitation. How about praying in public? I've said this before. I don't know why we Christians are so reticent about praying in public. I'm talking about being in the restaurant and preparing to eat lunch. And you pray at home, right? You bless your food at home, and being reticent to do that out in public. Think about it for a moment. What a witness it is when a family holds hands around a table at a restaurant, a public restaurant, and bows your head and you quietly pray. You give thanks to God. You bless the food just as you would do in your home. You never know who's looking in on that moment. You never know what person, what family might see you holding hands around that table and praying for your food, blessing the food, who might in that moment realize that there are people who believe that prayer matters. You never know. You never know who might see you offering prayer in public, quietly but unapologetically, who might themselves be moved to the power of prayer. Learn to share your faith. We're going to focus on that in the coming many months. I want you to learn to share your faith. I want you to be comfortable as United Methodist Christians sharing your faith. So as a part of our visioning effort and our focus on evangelism, we're going to teach you how to share your faith. Toward the end of this year or early next year, we will be offering classes in sharing the Christian faith with others, and doing so kindly, lovingly, sensitively, but unapologetically. I hope you'll avail yourself of that. I hope you'll want to learn how to share your faith with others. And then I would say finally, don't hesitate to say, I'm a Christian. Somebody says to you, why are you living that way? Well, I'm a Christian. Why are you sharing your resources with me? Why are you so kind to me? Well, I'm a Christian. Why are you willing to forgive that person? I can't believe you're going to forgive that person for what he or she did to you. Well, I'm a Christian. I can't believe that you love that person, that difficult person. I can't believe that you're willing to treat that person with kindness the way he or she's treated you. Why do you do that? Well, I'm a Christian. You don't have to carry a big placard around that says, hey, I'm a Christian, pay attention, world. But you can humbly and kindly and sincerely say to somebody when they ask you why you are the way you are, well, I'm a Christian. We should not apologize for being willing to let the world know that we have the convictions we have, we live the way we do, we care the way we do, we help others the way we do because we're followers of Jesus. Hey, I'm a Christian. And finally, I want to share with you this morning that our annual conference is focusing on evangelism. Our Bishop Bill McAlilly, has dedicated himself to starting manifold new churches in the Memphis Annual Conference, which is West Tennessee and West Kentucky. He believes that when you start new churches, you reach more people. That if you launch new congregations where new churches are needed, where there are not enough churches, in particular United Methodist churches, that will reach people we're not now reaching. And so he has committed himself again to start several new churches in the West Kentucky, West Tennessee area, and the first several of those are going to be in Shelby County. And among those, as you know by now, is the launch of a new Korean United Methodist Church who will be housed initially here at Germantown Methodist. And we're blessed by this. We're thrilled with this opportunity. And so it's my pleasure this morning to introduce to you Reverend Jen Kim and his wife Oknam and their daughter Eugene, who are launching this new Korean United Methodist Church in the Germantown, Collierville corridor to reach those who are unclaimed, unchurched, who need to be reached by the United Methodist Witness. What a blessing. What an opportunity. What a grand partnership this is. And so I want to invite now Jan and Oknam and Eugene to come to the front for just a moment and let me officially introduce you to them. Jan has been appointed now by Bishop McAlilly to launch this new Korean United Methodist Church. Their first service will be next Sunday at 11:30 a.m. In the chapel. Several of us have asked Jan, why would you start worship without a congregation? And his response to that has moved me dearly. He said, worship is about God. It's about focusing on God. So you worship whether there's a congregation or not. And you believe that as you worship, others will be inspired to come. And so next Sunday at 11:30, Jan and Oknam and Eugene, if nobody else, will be in the chapel launching worship to reach more people for Jesus Christ through a new Korean United Methodist Church. Jan, welcome. Oknam, welcome. Eugene, welcome.